All right, let's get this going. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are, particularly for Dave, good evening. Welcome to our very first Quiz the Wiz webinar. We've never done one of these before, so the format is an experiment. Hopefully it will go well. If it doesn't, you can tell us all about it at the end. But this is our very first one, and our focus today, whilst broad, is specific to Dynamics GP, so welcome to Quiz the GP Wiz. Couple of things to get covered off before we start. So introductions. Who are we? Around the table and on the phone, we have quite a terrifying collection of GP experience. So if we get everybody to introduce themselves very quickly. Firstly, to my left, Jerry Birma.
Hi, my name is Jerry Birma. I've been working with GP since 1999. I have a nasty cold and therefore will not be speaking a great deal today, but will be pointing, making facial contortions at Grantley while he speaks. My focus was originally on Canadian payroll and human resources, but then I got into more technical stuff, and now I work on basically anything to do with GP. Really good focus on budgeting and reporting, which will be its own webinar later on when I can speak more coherently.
To Jerry's left, John Carter.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Carter. I am a senior technical consultant here at TGO. I've been working with Great Plains GP since approximately 2004. My focus is primarily technical. I do upgrades and installations, implementation. I also do development. I've written in the past Dexterity code, a fair bit of VB.NET code, and lots and lots of SQL code. So while my focus is primarily technical, I will probably defer some of our questions to our special guests on the phone this morning.
Okay, I'll get myself out of the way. My name's Grantley Smith. My title these days is Senior Solution Architect at TGO. I've been working with GP since 1996. Yikes. And that's not the most experience in the room quite, but I've been working with GP since 96, and I specialize at TGO in trying to make it do things it wasn't necessarily designed to do, coming up with different ways of using bits of the application or attaching things to it to make it do stuff that you might not expect it to be capable of doing. Finally, nowhere near my left or right, or indeed even in the same room or on the same continent, we have a very special guest with us today, Mr. Dave Musgrave. Dave, introduce yourself.
Hi, so I'm David Musgrave. I'm sitting in my room in Perth, Australia, and due to the wonderful technology of the internet, I can talk to you guys. I've been involved with GP since about 1994, and I focus primarily on development and system parts of the application. I'm a MVP, a GPUG All-Star. I lost 13 years of my life with Microsoft, but I do have my soul back now.
So we calculated, for those of you that got reminder emails, that assembled around the table and on the phone, we have in excess of 80 years worth of GP experience. So we probably won't be able to answer anything usefully today at all. We are here where a lot of people did submit questions. Thank you very much for those of you that submitted one or more questions. Well, for the most part, thank you very much for those of you that submitted one or more questions in advance. We're here to try and answer them. If we don't get through all of them, then we can pick them up one-on-one afterwards. You'll get everybody's contact details, especially Dave's, when it doesn't know that yet. But we will give you everybody's contact details at the end of this, and we can pick up wherever we leave off. If too many questions, then we will roll them over to another session. As I said, this is the first one. If the format works, we're going to do more of these on more focused topics, on different topics, on potentially different ERP applications, different reporting tools. We'll let you good people on the phone tell us which topics we should cover, and we'll try and assemble slightly more brilliance next time around.
If during the discussions you have a follow-up question or an add-on question, please use the chat or questions buttons down within the webinar panel itself. We'll try to integrate those questions and/or comments as we go along. And we invite your feedback as often and as quick as you can possibly provide.
Okay, so that's who we are. That's what we're here for. The rules are pretty much that. We'll get through as much as we can do. If you want to submit more questions, use the box because everybody is on mute due to the volume of people that we have on this session. I'm afraid we can't just take mute off and have a free-for-all, unfortunately. But please type your questions in. We will read them out. If we get to one of your questions and you have something to add, please add it. Or if we've misinterpreted, by all means, correct us. So that being said, there aren't any other rules, so this should be interesting. We will pull up if we need to, GP, management reporter, show some stuff, whatever we think will help. So we've broken down the questions that we did receive into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wow, 8 sections. And we're going to address the sections in order. We did get some last minute questions. We've tried to add those in as well. So let's see where the next 40 or so minutes get us. And we will leave room for some sort of a Q&A at the end, which will be more of a type your question and we'll answer exercise if we have any time left at the end of all this. All right, so let's kick straight into general questions. And one of the first questions we got was, is there a prize for the best question? Who wants to take that one?
Well, I thought we agreed on no for the best question, but that we'd do something nice for us if we had the best answer.
I'm okay with that, although obviously if it's Dave, we'll have to mail it.
Yes.
Dave, don't come up with the best answer. We can't afford the postage.
Or bring it to Fargo. I'll see you in I'm flying on Friday.
We'll see you in a week. Some of us will. I won't. Okay, so let's get some straightforward stuff out of the way first in a section that we just called general questions. There was a question from hopefully one of our attendees. How do you record a macro in GP? There's a really short answer to this, and then there's all the tips and tricks that we've learned over the years in what you can do with that. So the short answer to how you record a macro in GP, and if I actually duck out to GP, if I do that and log into my GP session. Sorry, I've just decided to help myself to the first question. The simple and short answer to how you record a macro in GP is that under the menu button under Tools, there is an option called Macro, and there's a section to play and record macros. So macros in GP operate in the same way as they do in Excel when you record them, in that they are a keystroke macro. It remembers exactly what you're doing, exactly what sequence you press the buttons in, exactly what window you were in when you pressed the button, or tabbed through the field, or typed a record in, or whatever it was you were doing. And the macro that gets recorded can be opened up and edited using nothing more than a text editor or Excel or Word. So if you want to create a macro that does the same thing 50 times over, you can record the keystrokes for doing it once, open up the file, and then use your favorite mail, merge, sort, replace tool to create multiple iterations of those actions to create a macro that will do something across multiple data sets. Personally, I prefer Excel. I have seen people use Word and mail merge to do that. And the macro will do exactly what you tell it to when you play it back. Anybody else want to add anything to how to record a macro?
Just a quick comment is that macros are dumb. So if you want one macro to open a sub window and fill in something and another one not, it can't do that. There's no conditional logic in there.
Right.
And the other issue being that if you're playing back a macro, you must maintain focus on the window that the macro is running in.
Yes, if you start recording your macro in a window and then try and play it back without that window open and the cursor in it, it fails before you even start because it doesn't know what window it's supposed to be in.
Yeah,
Likewise,
I think the other bit with that is you've got to leave the computer alone, because if you start moving focus around to other apps, you can cause the macro to break.
One last point I'd add to that is that macros don't understand, to your point of them not being intelligent, they don't understand pop-up windows or error messages. If they trip over something that they weren't expecting, they just stop. All right. Let's go see what question number 2 was. Somebody else want to read? Jerry?
I use GP on a really high-res screen for all of my other apps. I've had a couple of customers come to us on this one, so you're not the first person to ask that question. And scale it up to 200% as per the setting. But when I look at GP, it's really, really tiny. What can I do?
All right, can I jump in on this one?
Please.
Absolutely.
So there is a couple of things that you need to look at. There is bitmap scaling, and there is bitmap fonts. So basically, we'll quickly talk about bitmap fonts. That is, you might sometimes, if you created GP on or first did your Windows install on a high resolution monitor, you might find that your writing in GP is really big and doesn't fit in the space for the prompts. And that could be that the writing has changed to 120% when it needs to be 100%. So that is a setting that can be fixed in the registry, and that will get the fonts right. But now the other one then is that they're too small. So now that they fit in the space that they're meant to be, but they're really tiny, and that's because bitmap fonts can't scale, and GP is using bitmap fonts. So some bits of GP can scale, like the home page and the menus, but the actual main windows will stay tiny. Steve Endow, one of our other MVPs, found a hack that you can use, which requires some files to be placed and registry entries to be changed, and that can make your window or make GP scale using bitmap scaling. Now, the cool thing is all of those registry and changes that you need are in GP Power Tools if you want to do it that way rather than have to look up and do the hacks yourself.
All right, I don't have anything better than that. Get an even bigger screen probably won't help. Okay.
No, you don't want to get a really super duper 4K monitor and then try and run it at full HD.
Why not?
Basically, everything's going to be chunky because if you run a 4K monitor at full HD, every 1 pixel is actually going to be 4 pixels on your screen. And you completely lose the benefit of having that high-res monitor where everything can be really curvy and smooth.
So all the edges of the round objects appear really jagged.
They would be jagged when, if you run it at 4K, you won't be able to see that the curves will be perfectly smooth. The trouble is that requires the applications to scale, and GP without this setting doesn't scale well.
Keep the 4K TV for when we're bunking off and not working. Got it. Okay. Like the whole of the World Cup.
The whole of the World Cup, basically, yeah.
All right. What happened to the support debugging tool in GP 2018? There used to be a tool, SDT, which we used to use a lot for various and assorted things, but was available through Microsoft and did some really useful stuff like coloring companies and things. But it's not in 2018. What happened to it?
All right, that one falls to me again. So the support debugging tool, which was originally the MBS support debugging tool, was a pet project of mine where I created the tool to help solve support cases while I worked at Microsoft. It ended up having a whole lot of other functionality added to it, and after a couple of years I was able to persuade Microsoft to let it loose, and it was well adopted in the channel. It was given away for free. When I left Microsoft in 2014, no one at Microsoft wanted to do anything to do with the tool, and it was discontinued. So I think the last official version was 2013. It was released the day before I was told I was redundant. So yeah, I released it on the Thursday, went to a meeting on the Friday and was told that I had a month before I left. So basically, when I left Microsoft, I actually negotiated the rights from Microsoft, and so the GP Power Tools is the future of the support debugging tool. It has everything the support debugging tool could do, plus lots of fixes and lots of new features. And it's available from 2010 through to 2018.
To that point, as a sidebar plug on your behalf, Dave, we will be running, for anybody who is interested, we will be running in the not too distant future a webinar specifically focused on Power Tools and what it can do for GP. So if we want to get into tons of detail around all of the wonderful features and functions that have been added to it since you got it back, we'll give you free reign to do that in an hour-long session, not too far from now.
And what we'll do additionally for our listeners is that we will highlight in the invitation webinar some of the cool stuff that it can do for your interest, so that you can take a peek and make sure that there will definitely be something that applies to something you do each day, and it'll definitely be worth your time.
Well, the cool thing is that you can have a 30-day demo just by installing it.
Yep.
All right, next question.
What are the future plans for GP?
I wish we'd got that question 2 weeks from now.
Exactly. We believe that Microsoft will be testing that at, well, greater length next week at the technical conference in Fargo. To the best of our knowledge, there will be GP releases at least through 2020. Currently beyond that,
There's always a 5-year roadmap. I've never seen less than a 5-year roadmap. The versions are now back to a 2-year cadence. So we saw a 2018. We won't see anything now until a 2020, which will probably, if they're true to form, Dave, I'm guessing we'll get December 2019.
Yeah, there's actually an update planned coming sooner than that, which is probably going to get announced officially at the tech conference. I think they want to move to an October timeframe rather than December timeframe. So they will move it earlier. So I'm under NDA for some things, but I can tell you that first of all, when it comes to the roadmap, they normally only run that to 2 to 3 years, or 2 to 3 versions, I think, ahead, because in the computing world, they really don't know exactly what's happening. So, you know, the roadmap is not going to specify what's happening in 10 years' time, because nobody knows in the computing world what's happening in 10 years' time. I do know that there is integration happening with Business Central, and that yeah, that will become more official later. I'm not giving anything away because it has been posted on some people have sent tweets about it. So I'm not going to give you much more information than that. But some of the functionality that you've got in Business Central will be exposed to on-premise users of GP. But it also could potentially make it easier for you to migrate at some stage in the future if you feel that Business Central offers everything that you are currently doing in GP.
Okay. Yeah, no, that being said, the roadmap tends to have really useful, vague things on it like enhanced usability. So in terms of what's actually going to be in it, as usual, we don't know just yet, but certainly a plan that goes out 2 or 3 versions is not unusual. But we'll have a lot more to tell you after Fargo.
One of the things that I do recall stating or reading was that a lot of the development focus would be based around customer feedback, so that based on user requests, so that if you have access to your customer source website or the other groups that are out there and can upvote requests for customization of things that you'd like to see in the product that other people have made suggestions for. If there's something you'd like to see, first of all, work with your VAR to make sure that that it's on the list, and then do your best to upsell that and get it noticed by as many people as possible.
There is actually a product suggestion website where you can go and look up other people's product suggestions, vote on them, and even add your own. And that website is checked by the product requirements teams.
We should probably, one of us, go, Gary, grab the URL for that while we're doing this, and we'll stick it up on the screen at the end for anybody who's interested. Some of the features that made it into 2018 made it to the top of the list with 50 or less votes. So it wouldn't be very difficult to get a feature that we all want to the top of the next release cadence. if we organise enough people to go vote for it.
Yeah, what people often do is, let's say on the forums, the GPUG forum or the community forums, they will add their product suggestion, and then they'll go out and request that people vote for it if it's something that they want.
Another good resource, we could throw the URL up for GPUG, which we are also attending this year.
Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix, Arizona in
October.
Okay. All right. We're still on page 1. Moving on. What are the plans for a replacement tool for Forecaster? Golly, for those of you that don't know, FRX Forecaster, subsequently Microsoft Forecaster, was a general ledger primarily based budgeting tool that came along with originally with FRX. Hasn't been around for quite some time. When it was decommissioned and when Management Reporter appeared, there was talk originally, Dave, you can correct me any time, of Management Reporter ultimately becoming not just a replacement reporting tool, but gradually inheriting budgeting functionality along the way. That plan changed significantly, and there is no intention of that happening that I'm aware of.
Yeah, it didn't happen.
Yeah, to put it politely. Management Reporter is going much the same way itself. So there are no plans for Forecaster to be replaced with anything. There are lots of other tools out there that do similar things. In fact, we here are currently going through, because of some of the shortfalls of Management Reporter and because of the non-existence of a budgeting tool in the Microsoft suite, we're actually going through an exercise of evaluating some 15 or so different best-of-breed budgeting and or reporting solutions. So there are lots out there. We don't intend to work with 15 of them. We're going to shortlist that pretty dramatically and come up with what we think are the best. But there is everything out there from the guys who originally wrote FRX and supported Forecaster at Microsoft, went off and wrote something that looks remarkably similar to it today. There are some other GP-specific budgeting applications out there, and then there's a bunch of generic off-the-shelf ones that will connect to anything. We have experience with some. Dave, have you played with many?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
So I know that Jet Reports is being pushed as a replacement for some of the functionality in Management Reporter, but
right.
I don't think it does the. Actually, it might have the forecasting part. We'd have to look that up.
No, we actually started looking at Jet yesterday as a formal evaluation of it. It does now ship with GP as a replacement or an alternative to Management Reporter, but it doesn't have any budgeting functionality at all. It is just a reporting add-in for Excel.
Okay.
All right, last of the general questions. Wow, we better speed this up.
We use several add-ons for Dynamics, such as Management Reporter, Smart List Builder, Smart Connect. Any talks of these tools being incorporated into the single solution? I'm going to defer on this one to you, Garley.
Okay. Smart List Builder belongs to E1, as does Smart Connect. They're not going to become part of Microsoft's portfolio anytime soon. Microsoft divested itself of all of its OEM tools, including Smart List Builder, back on 2013, I think. I'm looking at Joe.
That was 2013.
So actually, they've done the opposite. They've removed any of the third parties that they used to have OEM into the product, like Smart List Builder, like Collections Management. They've all been returned to their original manufacturers. So none of those are going to get incorporated back into GP anytime soon. They're going to stay firmly in the third-party community. Management Reporter is quietly just dwindling away. It's being maintained. To my knowledge, it's not being updated any more than it already has been, other than to keep it working. And they are now starting to ship Jet, which is still a third party, as an alternative reporting tool. So short answer, no. they're not going to get bundled into GP, quite the opposite, as far as I'm aware. Unless, Dave, you've heard anything different.
Nope.
All right. Third parties is not a bad word in the GP world, by the way, for anybody who's concerned about it. It's how the product grew, it's how the product developed. There are many, many best of breed add-ons to GP to make it do things that are not core out-the-box Microsoft functions, but then half the core out-the-box Microsoft functions weren't Microsoft's originally either. Manufacturing, fixed assets, the list goes on. Project, yeah, thank you. I think they can take full credit for analytical accounting. Good luck with that. But yeah, so it's how the product grew up. It's how it's developed. They're not a bad word. Most third parties either sit comfortably alongside GP or fit seamlessly inside the application. Where do we stand on third parties working or not working with the web client? Because one of the biggest developments that we've had in recent years was the full-blown HTML5 web client for GP, which makes it a viable option in the cloud on Azure and those kinds of things. So where do we sit on third parties in web clients, Dave? Basically, if they're written in Dexterity, they are pretty well, 99% going to work. There are a few tweaks you might need on the UI, and there's some things which, if you're doing anything weird, that's outside of the Dexterity world, it might that bit might not work. So my stuff works, but there are some features that aren't supported on the web client just because the web client can't do it or it doesn't make sense on the web client.
Can the web client do background colors yet, Dave?
No, that's one of the features that can't be done on the web client, and that's purely because the command is not honored by the web client. I can ask it to change the colors, but the Microsoft never implemented that functionality in the web client. And if there's a product suggestion out there, please go and vote for it. All right. I'll find you the link.
General questions. Got it. General questions. Moving on. Our next section is we've limited it to banking and AP because we've got a few questions on this. These are very functional specific questions. These will be a little faster to answer. So let's go from the top.
Right. Can we change the check address when we print the check instead of using the default from the remit to address?
I'm going to assume that this is referring to the remit to address on the vendor record, which is selected automatically as part of the payment run along with the vendor check name. There is no functionality in the payment window process to allow you to actually edit or change or even select the address that's going to print on the check or the name that's going to print on the check. You can change it on the vendor card before you do a check run and it will apply. If you change it on the vendor card after you generated a payment run, then it won't because it's already in there.
And that's really by security. You don't want anybody to have the ability to change those sort of details on a check during the payment process. That should be set up and secured in advance of actually making the payment.
Yeah, I assume you could probably go create something that would let you in to modify it on the fly, but from a security standpoint, it has been deliberately restricted.
I know we've had requests where it's a contest winner or something like that, the name would change on a regular basis, and you don't want to set up a separate vendor for each of those. And we're working through different ways of going through that. And if you have other questions that are specific to perhaps your situation, we can definitely discuss those on a one-on-one. But generally through the process, no, you shouldn't be changing the address. The process of making the payment, you shouldn't be changing the address on the check.
Okay.
How does GP manage EFT payments? Just generics. Talk around that, please.
All right, me?
Sure.
Okay. All right. EFT functionality has actually been around in GP for quite a long while. However, particularly up here in Canada, it used to be limited as to which banks we had a format for, and those formats were hard-coded into the EFT functionality. And if you didn't match one of those formats, you couldn't use EFT. So we had some pretty serious restrictions under which banks and even which account service with that bank you were signed up for that determined whether or not you could implement EFT in GP. That has changed over the years, as have the banking standards, and more recent versions of GP now have a designer instead that allow us to map out a template that will work for EFT. They have continued to add functionality to that, both for EFT and for ACH down into the US and even internationally, where we can now do a lot more than we used to be able to do. We can map for a lot more banks. We can map for the different standards of file for EFT that there are. And even more recently, they've included features like a settlement date in the file, which previously didn't exist. It got paid as soon as you transferred the file to the bank and processed it. You can now add a settlement date on the transactions. And they've even updated the EFT file, I think, as recently as the 2018 version to make sure that the vendor check name is the payee name that's pulled into the EFT file, whereas previously it was the vendor name. So continue to change it. It continues to be modified to meet the banking requirements and standards and some of the bank's requirements and standards individually. So it is much more readily available than it used to be. More current versions are better and do more.
And continuing on from that, how do I make a US dollar EFT payment, more acronyms please, to vendors who are based in Canada? So I've got a Canadian vendor who wants to get paid in US dollars using electronic funds transfer. How do I do that?
At least we think that's the question. It may not be.
If that was your question and I've misinterpreted it, please be sure to contact us and yell at me.
There are several different answers to this. You can process a US dollar transaction through a Canadian bank account, but it will go through the bank in Canadian dollars, although the payment transaction itself will hit the vendor in originating currency in US dollars. So you can make a US payment from a Canadian checkbook, but it will convert itself immediately into Canadian dollars. So if that's what you're trying to do, you can do that. If you're trying to just pay US funds from a US bank to a Canadian vendor that's set up as Canadian dollar, you can do that too. GP will let you do that. You do run into some issues with a mismatch of currency when you do the apply. The primary issue being how it doesn't know how to make a gain-loss calculation, and it leaves the originating currency behind on the vendor. Not that you'll ever see it, but it potentially could get revalued or messed up or other things. So the short answer is there are a couple of ways that it will work, depending on what you're trying to achieve. We probably would need to follow up on that with whomever asked the question one-on-one after this to give you a more specific answer to the problem that you're experiencing. And we'll do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right. Our bank transactions are set up to post through to the GL, but on a regular basis, we'll have some batches that don't, and we need to recover batches in order to have access to the batch so that we can post. What can be the cause?
Anyone?
Hosting issues, unfortunately, are not overly unusual in GP. Oftentimes, it can be network issues. If there is some sort of issue with connectivity with respect to SQL at any given time, that can lead to issues. But generally, I think for this, we would probably need additional information to see if there is a specific type of data issue potentially that would be causing the posting issues.
Now, that being said, I see it's bank. There are one group of transactions that don't post through even when post through is set, and that's any gain-loss stuff. Any of the multi-currency FX gain-loss on payment doesn't post automatically through, even though post through is set.
Is that a policy or is that a bug?
No, that's just how it is.
Okay.
That is, it's not a bug. It's always been the case. FX gain-loss journals, which are generated as a byproduct of other transactions, do not post through.
Okay.
All right.
We have one late arriving banking and accounts payable question, and it is quite simple. How do I merge two payable vendors' histories together? How does one do that?
I would think that one would use the professional services tool, the vendor combiner modifier tool. It is out-of-the-box functionality, assuming that the professional services tools library has been installed within a user's environment. The one downside to it, potentially, is that all reference to one of those vendors will be changed. So that going forward, all references would be to a single of the two vendors.
So all of the invoices that were under the vendor you were merging into another vendor would now look, to all intents and purposes, as if they'd always been under that vendor.
Correct.
So but the history stays, you don't lose them, they just literally just shift to the other vendor forever.
So that's fine if I've got 16 different Bell Canadas and I merge them all into one. I'm technically only paid Bell Canada. That's fine if you're looking at it from a Bell Canada standpoint, but if you wanted at some point to go, well, yeah, but how much of that was cell phone, and you kept them apart by having separate vendors for cell phone versus landline, then you've lost that ability to keep things separate.
Right.
Unless it's noted some other way.
And the professional services tools library has a similar function for just changing a vendor ID as opposed to merging vendors together. So that's hence modifier and combiner. There is also a version of that in the toolkit for customers, for GL accounts, for inventory items, for salesperson ID.
Serious? Cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I think that's it. But yeah, there's one of those for each of those. That's still free, right? PSTL?
Absolutely.
Cool. And still available on.
Absolutely. The one potential gotcha is that for most of the modification types that the tool performs, all users have to be out of the system except the SA.
Seems reasonable.
So it's not the sort of thing you'd be doing in the middle of a business day.
And if you run it on the GL, it will definitely blow up Management Reporter's database.
Yeah. So there are gotchas.
Data mart.
The data mart.
Yeah. There are gotchas to be aware of. This is something that needs to be planned carefully. This isn't something that you do on a Friday afternoon.
Okay.
Having done that once or twice.
Don't do what Jerry does.
No.
That's what I'm hearing. All right. Next bucket is accounts receivable.
How?
Boy, are we going to run out of time.
Yeah. How do we create an invoice template and organize recurring invoices on a monthly basis?
Okay.
Yes, you are going to take this one.
Am I?
Yes.
Are you sure, Dave? You don't want this one? Recurring invoices?
Not really.
All right. Okay. Depends what invoice template means and what recurring monthly invoice means. So short version of this answer would be you can use the sales order processing module to create recurring orders that will regenerate every time you transfer them to an invoice based on a frequency setting, much like you can have recurring batches elsewhere in the system. So recurring orders is one way of continually recreating what can then be transferred to an invoice and giving you the ability to edit that before you post the invoice. That's one way of dealing with it.
And so each month I will issue a $100 invoice to the same guy, but it'll have a separate date and a separate invoice number.
Yeah.
If I use the order process.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the order will immediately recreate, ready for you to do the same again the next month.
Cool. Am I time limited on that at all? Like, do I have to do 12 months in advance, or can I do 8 months, or what is there a specific time frame around that?
You set the frequency of the recurrence, and it regenerates based on that.
Traditionally within the year, or can I spend?
No, it keeps going.
Cool.
It keeps going. You can set it to recur 999 times, and it will do so.
Okay.
There are other ways of doing that. You can have recurring batches in receivables. You can even have recurring payment batches now in receivables, but that's less of the invoice template concept. That's more of just an AR transaction.
And with the recurring invoice, do I not get the same invoice number each time?
In that instance, yes. The document number doesn't change.
So again, for our listeners, it would depend on what the situation was internally for how you wanted to audit. invoice numbers versus order numbers, and which solution would then fit best for your environment.
On top of that, we then have an entire module around contract management, which is effectively recurring billing with a billing frequency and a revenue recognition function behind it. That's another way of addressing recurring invoicing or repeat invoicing or contract style invoicing. So it may be the answer is to use one of the other modules.
Yeah, it depends on the volume, I guess, of how many they had to do, and the revenue recognition issues around that would then expand it into I should be using contract versus the native tools.
Right. Contract allows you to time lines in and out of a contract, so we could bill this monthly and this quarterly, or this for the first 3 months and then stop billing it for the duration of the contract.
Yeah.
There's some other things that might lead you towards contract instead of just
completion too. Yeah.
Yeah, that too.
Okay.
And then there are more than one or two third-party add-ons that also deal with it.
Yep.
Depending on what the requirement is. So
yes, it can be done, but the solutions that will be proposed will be probably unique to your organization. So if that was you who did send us this question, contact us and we'll get into the specifics and help you walk your way through this.
Hence my job title.
Ta-da!
Solution architect.
Yeah.
All right.
How to change the AR invoice template to remove the extension of the phone number on the bottom. So walk us through, first of all, the process of the AR invoice template. And let's presume for the purposes of this, that we're discussing those lovely Word templates that are so much fun to set up.
So let's pretend for a minute it's the Word template. So worst case possible scenario.
Yes.
So I've modified the Word template to produce a prettier looking invoice than I can get from the straight GP report writer.
Which isn't really pretty, so I would have probably done that.
Okay. Everything that shows on the Word template is inherited from the report writer template. So however the field is laid out and however it is formatted in the report writer template is how it will display on the Word template. You can completely remove it, but you can't change its formatting because it's inheriting that from report writer. So if it's formatted to a particular phone mask,
yeah, right, okay.
then that's how it will show. So what you actually have to do is go back into report writer, change the mask on the phone number in report writer, assuming it's a field, not just text. If it's just text, then just go edit it. Or, yeah. But if it's a mask that's on the field in report writer, you have to go to report writer first and change it, and that will change it on the Word template.
Okay. How to schedule?
How to do that? Topic for today.
How do scheduled payments make the receivables process more efficient? What is scheduled payments first?
Scheduled payments is the ability in receivables to now have to schedule out the payment of an invoice. So you can create a payment schedule for a document whereby you get paid over time, basically.
Oh, okay.
Back to, is this a contract? Should it be being billed over time as opposed to up front? Back to, I don't really know if it makes your receivables process more efficient. It depends what you're looking for in terms of a process and what business need the scheduled payment is trying to address. So that one I think I have to follow up on. I don't have a one-off answer for that. It depends.
It depends on what your internal processes are.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is we have a macro set up to input cash receipts, but still have to manually apply the cash to specific invoices. Is there an easier way to go about this? So this is another one of those occasions where A, the macro is dumb, but B, it gets a lot of work done, but you still got to clean up afterwards. So why would I still have to manually apply? Could not the apply process be part of my macro?
I'm considering deferring to Dave on that one because I think the answer is no, because to do the apply, you have to go into a sub window with a scrolling grid, and I'm pretty sure that a macro can't be programmed to do that intelligently.
I think the problem is that the macro, I mean, if you've got more than one document you need to apply it to, then it's not the same steps every time. to actually find the line that the macro is on. So it could, the macro could reproduce it and put it onto the first line every time. But yeah, it doesn't have the smarts to actually make that happen properly.
All right.
Okay, now that being said, we have on many occasions created integrations for cash receipts that include cash apply.
Right. So
as opposed to a macro, which I guess is a basic form of automation and integration as such. But certainly you can integrate cash receipts with Cash App, but the macro isn't going to work.
okay. We've had fun discussing this last question internally. All of us have had input on how this would work. So is there any way to move the unapply button away from the find button inside the receivables batch? So if you're doing a cash receipt and you go to find an actual invoice, the unapply button is right beside it. If you happen to accidentally click it, you've unapplied all of the little check marks that you've made up until that point, which is really, really annoying. So as it stands right now, Grontley is flipping over to that lovely sales apply window right now, and you can see for yourself how that the find button and the unapply button are right beside each other. And it's obviously quite easy to click one versus the other, and suddenly you have to redo all your work.
There is no commit on the unapply button. It happens instantaneously in the window when you hit it. There isn't a save or a post or anything. So yeah, good question.
So the hassle that we've come across is that the ribbon at the top is different programming, if you will, from all of the other boxes on the window.
So there are a couple of things here, in fact. The ribbon appeared in GP 2013. Prior to that, it was more of a toolbar, and it was possible to simply modify the window using modifier and move that button on the toolbar. So you could very easily move the unapply button away from that find button, move it right over to the far right of the window if you wanted to. After modifying the window, you'd need to set security to point to that modified version of the window, but it was doable. But from 2013 R2 forward, I believe it is, that the ribbon bar has been in place instead. There isn't a way to modify or easily modify the ribbon bar because it's produced differently programmatically. There is a bit of a MacGyver method to this in that you could disable the ribbon. There's a setting in the dex.ini that allows you to revert back to the toolbar instead of the ribbon bar, but that would eliminate some of the really nice functionality that's been provided on the ribbon bar. So we were having a discussion with David about this earlier, and the way that we could potentially get around this, although we can't move the unapply button, we could apply a confirmation prompt against it so that if the unapply button is clicked and it's inadvertent, there could be an "Are you sure you want to do this?" attached to that.
So the person who submitted that question and then had the "or if the unapply was accidentally clicked" could confirmation window pop up. There is definitely the possibility that that could be done. Contact your bar, contact us, and we can discuss the process for moving forward on that request. All right, we find ourselves a little scrambling for time right now. So what we're going to do is pick a couple of the questions on the next slide, which is our infrastructure slide. We're going to slide over the discussions about the cloud and the advantages of 365 over 2016, and it is 365 FDA Part 11 compliant.
Yeah, sorry.
And we will probably address those in a specific infrastructure type seminar that follows after the Fargo technical conference that will have way more information to share with everyone.
We do have an approach for, and we will run a session specifically on what GP in the cloud means, because we have a lot of legacy GP customers that are being asked about this, or their IT departments are being mandated to have something like a cloud-first, mobile-first initiative. I run into a lot of those recently. We keep coming across that. There are answers to those questions, and there is more than one answer to what that could mean and how you could achieve that. We'll never fit it all in today. So yeah, anything that's GP Cloud, anything that's 365 for today's purposes, we're going to hold over for another specific session about what GP Cloud 365 actually means, coupled with, as Dave alluded to, some more information coming out shortly anyway.
Okay, so
that
rather
being
than
said,
spending any more time on those
yep.
questions, what we'd like to discuss is when will the search by document in AP inquiry in GP 2018 be fixed? For those of you who are not on GP 2018, if you go inquiry transactions document by vendor and attempt to search a document, it could take upwards to 5 to 10 minutes just to pull back a single document. A new version was released for 2018 with a hotfix in January, I believe.
Yeah, it was the January hotfix included what Microsoft called a fix for this particular functionality, and everyone who we are familiar with who is using this functionality has said no, it is not fixed. We've had occasion to open a couple of different support cases actually on behalf of our clients, and the official response from Microsoft is that it was addressed in the January hotfix and they are not going to be pursuing it any further. So as to when Microsoft will be fixing it, they believe it's already fixed. What we do have is an alternative, a PM transaction search window. This is something that was initially built by Steve Endo at Receivable Services, and it is actually a very useful tool. It is a separate window. It's a third-party add-in, but it is actually quite effective in returning the data that would otherwise be returned by that all-in-one viewer window. It should probably be noted that the all-in-one viewer is basically trying to pull back every payable record that's in the system, and that's one of the reasons that it's slow. So there are ways to manage that within the window, but this is actually a very good alternative window. Provided by Receivable Services. It's basically a free tool, a free download.
So our friend Steve Endo.
Steve, our friend.
Dave, have you come across this one?
Yeah, it's actually using part of one of my free tools as well to add it onto the menus.
We've rolled it out to a couple of customers, and they are very, very happy with it. We were sort of surprised. We felt that the transaction search within GP was relatively limited to just our friends in the AP department. And when they went, yeah, it's slow, we went, okay, we'll see if we can figure it out. But it turns out that this view, that this search was used quite extensively throughout the entire organization. Anybody who had access to GP was doing searches on vendors and transactions, and having this search tool available is making everybody's life really easy. Everything returns really, really fast. It's got an actual counter down in the bottom to tell you how fast things are coming back, and everyone is adoring how quickly it works.
Not to mention it's open source and anybody can modify it, so if we want to put in a particular tweak for somebody, we can do.
Yep. All right, next question. I think I'm just going to have from a quick big picture standpoint, we're going to obviously have a separate reporting seminar. So those 3 pages we've got on reporting questions, we will be getting back to those. They are important. We consider, everybody's been putting so much information into their GP system. It'd be nice if we could get it out in nice and efficient ways. And printing and reporting questions are very, very valuable to us, and we'd like to help as much as we possibly can. So I don't think that a reporting webinar is untoward, and we'll probably set something up for that. Going back here to our last infrastructure question. Printing tone is light when printing GP 2015 reports, but for outside applications like Excel, the printing tone is fine. What could make that difference? Where would I look to go fix something like that?
It could be
Technical
related
guy?
to the font used. So we probably want to know whether this is a text report or a graphic report, or whether it's coming from Word.
Okay.
Could it also be potentially that we're running through a thin client and the printer driver that Excel is using on my workstation is different to the printer driver that, say, Citrix is using? Could it be driver related?
It could absolutely be driver related. And also, if they have name printers in action, name printers could be changing settings. And the light tone could be because it's in one of the economy modes, or it could be just that the font being used is a finer font.
Okay, so further investigation required.
Yeah, definitely. So if that was you, there's a couple of points that you can throw at your IT guys going, hi, why is things going so slow, or rather printing so fine? And if they need some assistance, we are available.
Okay, at the top of the hour, I think we're all perfectly prepared to stick around another 15, 20 minutes and see what we can get through. So without really asking anybody else's permission, we're just going to crash on, at least through some of these. Probably not the MR specific ones,
Okay.
But certainly some of the smart list questions, if we can just bang through those quickly for anybody that can stick around and listen.
Certainly. Okay, so smart lists. One of the biggest one, and we had this from at least 4 or 5 different users, was what's the difference between Smart List Builder, Excel Report Builder, and Smart List Designer?
Yeah, I think it's worth combining all of those.
I think it would be good of us to discuss what they are and what they can do, and
actually,
where one uses each of them.
And actually then plays down into the last 2 questions as well.
Yep.
Okay, you're looking at me again.
Again.
Yeah, all right, okay.
It's that accent.
Smart lists in GP are a wonderful, wonderful thing. We all know and love them. They have their limitations. Smart List Builder was created to give you a way around some of those limitations by allowing you to design custom Smart List objects outside of the list that Microsoft provides you with. One of the reasons that's so useful, down to question 3, how do we combine templates from different modules? In Smart Lists, you can't. The object is the object. It only lists the data it lists. And the reason that they're broken out as they are is to avoid there being any one-to-many relationships in a Smart List. So the reason why the vendor address list is different from the vendor list, is different from the vendor transactions list, is because there are different combinations of records involved in those. So what Smart List Builder let you do was build custom Smart Lists, so that you could create Smart Lists that crossed that one-to-many relationship, that showed AP transactions with GL distributions, not 2 different lists. So Builder let you do that. Smart List Builder is a third party. Microsoft in 2013 released their version of it called Smart List Designer, which isn't a third party and is included in the core product. So if you don't own Smart List Builder, if you're any version past 2013, you have access to Smart List Designer, which is the same concept. It lets you build custom smart lists, either by relating tables together in the designer or by creating a view in the database in SQL and slapping a brand new smart list on top of that view. So that's how you build the objects that aren't in the list, Smart List Designer or Smart List Builder. Either works. Builder has some functionality that Designer doesn't. Designer's not far behind at this point. Builder is paid for, Designer is free. Excel Report Builder is a mirror image of Smart List Builder. Again, it's a third party, but it allows you to build the Excel refreshable reports, which out of the box, there's one for every Smart List. For anybody who hasn't seen them, there's a full stack of Excel reports, Office data connections that give you live refreshable data in a spreadsheet. Excel Report Builder lets you do the same thing as Smart List Builder did. It lets you build refreshables that aren't in the list. It's a third party, it's paid for. There's a version of it now in Designer that lets you do the same thing as well. So how do we combine different templates from different modules into one? The answer is Smart List Builder or Smart List Designer. We need to create that new Smart List object. Last question on Smart List. Is the AR ATB under Smart List reliable for historical ATB reconciliations? That's a very specific question, and I'm guessing it refers to somebody's Smart List favorite, because there isn't an object called AR ATB. So somebody's got a Smart List favorite set up that gives them an accounts receivable trial balance listing of some sort.
So we believe that there are two issues with historical and Smart List. First of all, for an historical ATB, what you need to do is provide a date and then have any activity that has happened after that date be removed from the records for that report. So a Smart List can't do that. A Smart List can only spit out what it sees. It doesn't have the ability to roll back transactions, remove payments, or apply new invoices. So historical, no, it's not going to work for you. Also, excuse me, there is an issue, if I'm not mistaken, where the volume of data retrieved by Smart List, if it's huge, can sometimes be an issue.
It starts to become a little bit flaky based on the number of columns and the number of rows, just generally the size of the data set. Yes. And by flaky, I mean it starts to miss stuff out randomly.
Yeah. So
and it slows down dramatically.
That brings in the potential of the other Smart product, being Smart View, which could potentially be used to make that a little bit better. But it will neither will work for historical reconciliation. Back to you, good sir.
Okay, that's all the Smart List questions. We did get some very specific management reporter questions. I think we're probably best to defer those to another session right now, because we're going to have to focus on reporting in more detail anyway. I did want to do the Smart List one because it's part of GP. MR is a separate application. It has some idiosyncrasies entirely of its own, so I was going to defer those.
Actually, could we address question number 3 here about the missing journals, or what are apparently missing journals in
Please do.
reporter?
Sure, we haven't lost too many attendees yet.
Okay, so the full question was,
in Management Reporter, we often have issues with running reports that are not picking up the latest journals. Seems to be the repeat of the previous report. It's missing journals that have just been added to the GL.
right. So in Management Reporter, there's the concept of the data mart. If a report is referring to or extracting data from the data mart, it is distinctly possible, in fact, that the data is not up to date. It is not a real-time reporting data source. There is an integration, or in fact multiple integrations, between the GP databases, assuming GP is the ERP, and the data mart. Integrations are designed to run, depending on the integration type, either every minute or every 5 minutes. That can be tuned or tweaked so that data could be integrated more quickly. However, chances are that if journals are not appearing in a report in MR, it is simply because of the fact that the data has not integrated yet. Be patient, it will probably be there in about 10 minutes.
All right. Okay, so a couple more quickly. We'll try and address for you while we're here. There was a question, there are a couple more reporting questions. One was asking if there's a way when printing cash receipts to change the default report selected in the print window from template to standard, or vice versa. The real short answer to this is that template is referring to a Word template, standard is referring to the normal GP report. It changes if you enable the Word template for that particular report. It's a setting at the company level. It changes for everybody, but you can turn off the Word template and it will revert back to standard by default, and that is hidden under, I'm going to forget where it is now. That is hidden under
reports, template management.
Thank you. Reports. template configuration, if the template is turned on, for example, for the cash receipt posting journal, it will default to saying template instead of standard. If you uncheck that box, it'll go back to standard, but that is a
system-wide for everybody.
For that company.
Okay.
It's at all company module report. Okay. So that will flip it back to standard. Thanks, Dave. I found it yesterday and immediately forgot it again. In a trial balance printed PDF, some information is cut off. Anyone?
Don't know. What would cause that?
Usually,
what size paper do you use? Do you use A4?
Over here, we use letter.
Yeah.
Okay.
But why?
If it's rendering to screen in full, but it's getting cut off when you generate the PDF, it's got to be to do with generate. Is the PDF scaling? 97% or something stupid in the driver?
The driver possibly has a margin, and you might be going outside of that margin on the driver, which will just cut it off. So the question I asked about the size of paper, because A4 is narrower than US letter, and in Australia we actually have a A4 chunk which adjusts the width of a lot of the reports so that they don't go too wide. You might actually have to use Report Writer and just bring the right-hand edge of that back in.
Okay. We only had one other question, and that was a very specific question from somebody regarding multi-entity. Multi-entity is actually a third party for GP from Binary Stream in the West Coast, and it's around currency revaluation. It's a very specific question. We're not ignoring it, but without looking at how you've got MEM set up, because there's a lot of configuration behind multi-entity management. I don't think we're in any position off the cuff today to give you an accurate answer as to what that cause might be. That would require some research and a look at how you've got multi-entity management actually configured and running. So please contact us or whomever your partner is for support on that one, because that one is pretty specific and will be configuration based. Okay, I think we're well past time. So that being said, I think what we wanted to do was just give you a couple of links, websites, email addresses that you might like to go to. Before I do that, Dave, do you have anything you'd like to add to the day?
In the chat directly to you guys, I did send you the link for the ideas.
Yeah.
And also for the particular product suggestion about getting color, background colors into the web client.
Yeah, that's gone on the.
I think the generic one's gone on the slide, not the link to Dave's specific one. It's kind of too long to put on here, but if you want us to send it out and then follow up, we absolutely can do.
More votes would be good.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll make sure everybody here votes for it. But other than that, just wanted to put out, it's not a particularly friendly URL. I'm sure there's an easier way of finding it, but that is just the general URL for GP ideas, where there's a button to, if you haven't seen it before, there's a button to suggest a new idea, or to indeed vote for any of the ideas that are there. And you can see there are plenty here, not least of all including the colors one. Sorry. I'm looking at that, you're not. There we go. There we go. So there's the ideas page for GP, where you can post ideas and vote on ideas and try and get your stuff into the next release.
Just to note that when something's been accepted or under review, it doesn't mean it's actually fixed. It just means that the team in Fargo have actually acknowledged it.
Okay, good to know. So with that, I'll leave the email addresses, the URLs. We put the GPUG link up there, the Great Plains user group. There is a summit, as we mentioned, coming up. Jerry will be there.
We'll have a team there.
So avoid that like the plague.
No, come and visit me in person. I'm going to have a stand. I will have a stand.
Cool. Winthrop will actually be there, blogging stuff.
And if you're planning on going, go look at my blog. I've got a blog that gives you a code for a 10% discount to sign up.
There you go.
And where do we find your blog?
winthropdc.com/blog.
Okay, so just follow the back end of your email addresses on the screen then.
Yep.
All right, well, we're over time. I hope that was useful. On the way out of the webinar, you will get a very short survey to help us figure out how we did, what we can do better, what we could do next time around. Like we said, if this has proved successful and popular, it's going to be the first of many. We'll do one purely on GP Cloud 365. We'll do one specifically on the Power Tools functionality. We're definitely going to have to do one specifically on reporting tools and some of the problems that people have with reporting, and any other topics you think would be useful and worthy of filling an hour and getting some experts in a room and just answering your questions.
And if only to make me feel like I have contributed something, please, if you have HR or payroll type questions, throw those. Maybe we can get an hour-long discussion on HR and payroll. I think it's interesting. Some people don't, but if we get enough people together, we can definitely do something on that.
All right, so with much thanks to my colleagues in the room, to Jerry and to John, and huge thanks to Dave for staying up late. What time is it, Dave?
It's 11:15 p.m.
PM in Australia. Yikes.
Tomorrow? Is it tomorrow or is it
tomorrow or is it today?
No, it's still the 15th.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, but very, very great thanks to Dave for joining us. Really appreciate it, Dave.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
There will be another one following shortly. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. We'll do all this again another time.
All right.
Thanks ever so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Dave.